So we were discussing the UV and visible spectroscopy. This part we have discussed, but again I am coming with the sampling technique, how the sample it is being taken and how the visible spectra or UV visible spectra of the compound is taken. Usually a hydrogen discharge lamp that is utilized for the UV purpose, and simple tungsten filament is utilized for the visible light. Light from a source it is thrown over a prism. Then various wavelengths are selected. The rotating prism is used. By rotation of the prism, we are able to send a series of wavelengths through the slits. By one angle, it will be the suppose 200, by another angle it will be the 210, then it is at 220, 230, so on. We can rotate the prism so as to get the visible spectra or visible wavelength from here. When the wavelength pass through the slits, a fine beam is created that is splitted through a circular mirror to the sample as well as to the solvent. Sample is never taken in the solid state, it is taken in the liquid state, in solution state I can say, dissolved in some solvent, or the sample can be the gaseous one. Then the light passed through the sample as well as it is passed through the simultaneously through the solvent. Some part of the light it is being absorbed, another part it is being transmitted. Photocells are there, then they read only the absorbed part. By combining the absorbed part which is coming from the sample as which is coming out from the solvent, it is made minus through the sample absorption, so that solvent absorption doesn't get recorded over the spectra. Then that is fed to a recorder. Recorder is generally a pen that records over a paper. How recording is there? Generally the wavelength which are absorbed, they are being converted into corresponding currents, and by the amplitude of the current the pen either moves up or it moves down or it draws a curve over the paper. By this way the UV or visible spectra is being taken. This we have already discussed, but reminding again that whenever there is a transition from the one energy level to the another energy level, this is the ground state E0 and that is the first energy level here. So each energy level is composed of, electronic energy level is composed of the various vibration levels. So here V0, V1, V2, these are the various vibration level, and each vibration level again you are able to say various lines that is composed of the various rotational lines. Means electronic level contains the vibration level and vibration level contains the rotation level. Whenever a electronic change takes place from one energy level to the another energy level, then not only the electronic state change but also vibrational levels change, also the rotational levels change, so we get the band spectra instead of the line spectra that we have already discussed. Coming to the next part, what is Beer-Lambert's law that we have to discuss. These were the two scientists, one is the Beer and another is the Lambert. They said simply that whenever from a light source the light is passed through any compound, here C sample is being there, so light is coming from the source, it is entering to the sample, then some of the light is absorbed and some of the light it is being transmitted. So suppose I0 is the intensity of the light that is being incident on the sample. I is the intensity that is being transmitted. Then the ratio of the transmitted light, that is I, divided by I0, it will be the transmittance. But I am saying the ratio of the intensity of the transmitted light to the incident light, I upon I0, that is termed as the transmittance. And inverse of it, that is I0 divided by I, which I have written here down, I0 divided by I. It is found by where that log of this I0 upon I, it is inverse of transmittance, we can say it is a absorbance. So absorbance log of A, or this absorbance, it is found to be proportional to the concentration, that is the Beer's law. And Lambert says that it is found to proportional to the path length through which the light crosses. Path length means how thicker is the sample, whether the light passes through the thin film of the solution or it passes through the thick film of the solution. So that is sample length. So the combination of these two laws, that is Lambert-Beer's law, it is that absorbance is directly proportional to the concentration of the solution, that is C here. It is proportional to the sample length, that is L here, and a constant of proportionality, that is the epsilon. This is termed as the epsilon. It is constant of proportionality. So absorbance is proportional to C, absorbance is proportional to the path length, but equal to the E epsilon into C into L. Epsilon is the constant of proportionality. This is termed as the molar extinction coefficient, or it is also termed as the molar absorptivity. What we say? Molar absorptivity. No more details here, because only we need here A and epsilon for the purpose of the UV and visible spectroscopy. So that was the need to discuss the Beer's and Lambert's law. How a spectral data is presented over a paper. Usually molar extinction coefficient, it is plotted against the absorbed wavelength. So as earlier I said that not a single wavelength is used. So here you see 200, 240, 280, 320, means we will start from 200 and it will end up by the 800 nanometer, that is the last line regarding the visible region here. So we are plotting the epsilon, molar extinction coefficient. Molar extinction coefficient is of much use because it is a direct indicator of the intensity of the line. It is a direct indicator of the intensity of the lines. Usually its value more than 1000, that is 10 raised to power 3, then that lines are of importance because we are able to see these lines in the spectra. What if the value of epsilon is less than 10 raised to power 3, then those lines or spectral lines are not of use because we are not able to see it over the spectra. Usually the spectra is a broad peak, so it starts from 200 ending at here 320 nanometer. So particularly that is of no use, and we never present the data just like this way. Only we present maximum wavelength. See here at 279 there is a peak in the spectra. So wherever is the lambda max is there, only that is presented with the epsilon value. Means it is not of use to present this graph for the UV and visible. Only you write what is the lambda max for the value, what is the epsilon value for the compound. That is sufficient to say about the UV and visible spectra. If we are not plotting the epsilon value, we can also plot wavelength here, that is the epsilon value. We can also plot the wavelength, here absorbance instead of the epsilon. So means epsilon can be plotted against the wavelength or absorbance can be plotted against the wavelength. So that is a UV visible spectra for the benzoic acid. Usually quartz cell that is being utilized, that is already said that glass absorbs in the region of UV visible. So we are not using the glass cubit, but instead of the glass cubit we use the quartz cubit. This quartz cubit is never touched with the hands. The spectra, it is either taken in the vapor phase or it is taken in the solution phase. Now where the compound will absorb and where the compound will not absorb, or how it is absorbing. In a general organic compound we are having the sigma bonds, we are having the pi bonds, we are having some heteroatoms in the compound like nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus and the sulfur. These heteroatoms, they contains non-bonding or lone pair of the electrons. For example, nitrogen contains one pair of the electron over it, oxygen contains two, sulfur contains two, phosphorus also contains the lone pair just like a nitrogen, one lone pair. So these lone pairs or non-bonding electrons are there. It means we are having the sigma electrons, we are having the pi electrons, we are having the non-bonding electrons. So there can be a transition from the sigma bonding electron to the sigma anti-bonding. There can be a transition from the sigma to the pi star, means pi anti-bonding orbitals. There can be a transition from the pi bonding molecular orbital to the pi star anti-bonding molecular orbitals. Also, the non-bonding electrons, they can be excited to the sigma star, means sigma anti-bonding molecular orbitals, or they can be excited to the pi star, that is pi anti-bonding molecular orbitals. So any transition can occur whenever the energy is supplied to a molecule, it is thrown over the molecule, and especially the UV visible part. That means 200 to 400 nanometer, that is the ultraviolet region, and 400 to 800 nanometer, that is the visible region. We are having alkanes. You know, alkanes simply contains the sigma bond. So here this is a part of ethane molecule here. So this carbon, another carbon here, 3 bonds, just sigma bonds here, 3 sigma bonds here. So between the two carbons there is a 1 sigma bond which I have represented by the stars. So these are the sigma electrons. So whenever UV light is thrown over them, then one of the sigma electron, it get excited to the sigma star anti-bonding molecular orbital. It get excited to the anti-bonding molecular orbital. Now what happens to the molecule actually, whether bond breaks or bond doesn't breaks? You know, whenever there will be a transition from the 2s to the 3s, means E2 to the E3, then obviously the bond will break because there is a migration of electron from the one orbital to the another orbital. Whenever bonding is there, then these bonding orbitals don't lie much above the, or these bonding or anti-bonding orbitals don't lie much above the bonding molecular orbitals. So bond doesn't breaks whenever the electron migrates from bonding to the anti-bonding. What its energy is raised, and that energy is equivalent to the anti-bonding molecular orbital. So such type of a transition, sigma to sigma star, it can occur in the alkanes. Here I have shown that methane absorbs at 125 nanometer. As earlier said, that the spectra below the 200 nanometer is of no use because it is the far ultraviolet region or vacuum region. We need special techniques to take the spectra. So these are of no use. So it means data below 200 nanometer is not represented. So whether it is absorbing at 125 nanometer, whether it is absorbing at 195 nanometer, so these lines are of least concern. Then second, N2 sigma star means a heteroatom. For example, halogen that is present in the with the carbon. Then you know halogen is having lone pairs of electron. I have shown only two here. Chlorine, fluorine, bromine, iodine, all these contains a non-bonding electron. So there can be excitation of this non-bonding electron from its atomic state to the bonding or anti-bonding molecular orbitals of the carbon. So I have shifted the electron from the halogen atom to the carbon atom, that it has got shifted from the non-bonding state to the anti-bonding sigma star, anti-bonding sigma orbitals. So this type of transition is also possible, and it is possible in case it is the halogen, oxygen or nitrogen that is attached there. What is the gap between the two levels is there? That is going to suggest how much energy is needed for the excitation. As in this diagram, you know there is a maximum gap between the sigma to sigma star, means more energy is needed. More energy is needed means we are moving toward the far ultraviolet region or lesser wavelength. The radiation of the lesser wavelength is utilized. Then we see here that from sigma to pi star, then it is the distance that is lesser than the sigma star. So we need now lesser energy for the excitation. So lesser energy means little longer wavelength, little longer. Suppose for the methane, as earlier said, sigma to sigma star, it is 125 nanometer. So sigma to pi star, it can be 140 nanometer. Then pi to pi star transitions are next in the line. So the energy gap is lesser than the sigma to pi star. So means we require less energy for the change of the electron from pi to pi star. So we can say 140 nanometer which was required earlier, now it can be 170 nanometer. Then N2 sigma star are there. N2 sigma star, the gap is little less than this pi to pi star. It means we require again lesser amount of energy than that one. N2 pi star, it is having the minimum energy gap. So minimum energy is required for the electron to change from non-bonding state to the anti-bonding pi molecular orbital. So whenever we say less energy means it is longer wavelength. Whenever we say more energy required, it means it is the lesser wavelength. So sigma to sigma star 125 to 125 nanometer for the methane. In case of heteroatom, chlorine, fluorine, bromine, we require less energy for the excitation. The energy required for the excitation also changes with respect to the heteroatom attached. Suppose it is the chlorine attached. Then we know that chlorine is more electronegative, so electrons are firmly held with the atom. So whenever electrons are firmly held, they require more energy for the movement from one state to the another state. But in case iodine, the electronegativity is less. So it means electrons are loosely held. They are farther from the nucleus. So lesser energy is required for the excitation in case it is the iodine is present. So that is the difference here. Methyl chloride is absorbing at 173 nanometer. Methyl iodide absorbing at 258 nanometer. Whenever oxygen is present, we know that oxygen is more electronegative. So more energy is required in comparison to the amines. Amines is the nitrogen, and nitrogen is less electronegative than the oxygen. So here electronegativity difference creates the absorption change, that it is moving whenever there is a loosely held case, then it moves to the longer wavelength, and whenever there is tightly held case, that for example oxygen or it is the chlorine, then it is moving toward the shorter wavelength. Then pi to pi star transitions are also there. Pi to pi star transitions are very much common in the alkenes bond or alkynes molecules. So here the electrons are there, they are being excited from the pi bonding molecular orbital to the anti-bonding molecular orbitals. These transitions are of much use, reason being these are very intense band in the spectra. Sigma to sigma star band are also intense, but they lie in the far ultraviolet regions, so no use. N to sigma star, they are of very less concern because their intensity is low. I will discuss again these later on, why this intensity is low and why some their intensity is higher. But pi to pi star transitions are of very much use because these are very intense band present in the spectra. So the main part is here, that is of the discussion. It is the double bonds that are mainly discussed in the UV and visible, double bond or the triple bond, because they are going to put a intense band in the spectra. Acetylene, it is absorbing at 170 nanometer. These are much sensitive to the substitution. Whenever there is substitution, either it is shifting toward the shorter wavelength or it is shifting toward the longer wavelength. N to pi star transitions are also very common because very lesser amount of energy is required. So in case of the ketones or aldehydes, we are having these transitions, that is N to pi star transitions. So very less amount of energy is required for the N to pi star transitions. Then in higher, it is the pi to pi star transitions. Then higher energy is required for the N to sigma star, then sigma to pi star, then sigma to sigma star. Only the below two lines, these one, pi to pi star transitions and N to Y star transitions, these are of mainly concerned in the UV and visible spectroscopy. How the conjugation affects the spectra? Listen carefully. Suppose we are having the ethylene. Ethylene means two carbon atom, one sigma bond between one carbon to another carbon atom. I am not talking about the CH bonds, only CC bonds. Then C double bond, C is also there, a one double bond, that is the pi bond is there. So I am concerned here with the pi to pi star conjugation, pi to pi star transitions. Pi to pi